Hello and welcome. Today we're going to explore a mystery rooted deep in stone and soil, one that has stood for centuries in silence, veiled beneath vines, weather, and time. A mystery not defined by a disappearance or a sudden event, but by the sheer audacity of creation itself. We're headed to the shadowy jungles of Southeast Asia, where a temple the size of a small city rises from the forest like a memory no one meant to forget. This isn't a story of fear. It's one of quiet awe, of marveling at what humans once achieved, and wondering how much we still don't understand. Here you're not chased by anything. Instead, you wander, you listen, and you notice the details left behind. You stand at the edge of dawn, where the jungle breathes slowly, and the world holds its breath. In front of you stretches a long stone causeway, slick with dew, flanked by crumbled statues of lions and nagas, the sacred serpent guardians of a long-lost kingdom. Mist drapes low over the trees. The silence isn't empty, it's full, like the pause between one heartbeat and the next. You walk slowly forward. The temple is ahead. Massive, tiered towers shaped like lotus buds pierce the morning sky. Their outlines are sharp but softened by the humid air. As you approach, the details emerge. Carvings of gods and warriors, rows of apsaras with gentle smiles, sandstone steps worn smooth by centuries of feet. This is Angkor Wat, a name that echoes with reverence and uncertainty. Built in the 12th century, and yet, still not fully understood. It isn't just a temple. It's a complex, an entire symbolic universe set in stone. Some say it represents Mount Meru, the mythic center of the cosmos in Hindu belief. Others say it was meant to be a tomb, or a timekeeper, or a map of the stars. What's certain is that it was built by the Khmer Empire. Or was it? Because even that simple truth hides layers of questions. You step through a narrow entryway. The stone is cool beneath your hand. Lichen paints soft green across the gray. A carving nearby shows a celestial battle, gods riding on chariots of flame. Every figure is precise, poised. They knew what they were doing. The stones here are sandstone, quarried from over 50 kilometers away. Each block weighs tons, yet they fit together with an eerie precision, so tight you couldn't slip a knife between them. And somehow, despite centuries of tropical storms, the carvings remain astonishingly clear. But who built this? Not just which ruler, but which people. How did they organize the labor? What tools did they use without iron, without wheels? And perhaps the most haunting question, why? A fact settles in your mind as you pass through another chamber. Angkor Wat is aligned precisely with the cardinal directions. At equinox, the sun rises directly over the central tower. There's astronomy in this stone, as if the builders wanted to link earth to sky with geometry and ritual. Theories swirl in the silence. One claims the temple was built not just for the gods, but as the gods. That every corridor, every courtyard, is part of a giant mandala, designed to transform the temple-goer into the cosmic center. You don't just visit Angkor, you travel through it, like a soul ascending through stages of understanding. You hear a distant bird call echo through the stone halls, a soft flutter, a breath of wind through palm fronds. The jungle never stops, even when the empire has. There's a story, half-whispered, that Angkor Wat wasn't built by men at all, but by gods or giants or Naga themselves. That it rose overnight, fully formed. Of course, that's myth, but isn't every grand monument a little mythical? You turn a corner and pause before a hallway that stretches long and narrow. Light pools in patches on the stone floor. The scent of earth and age fills your lungs. You're alone here, but never lonely. The walls are speaking if you care to listen. Somewhere above, monkeys stir in the trees, and beneath your feet, roots probe silently through foundations built to last forever. The name Angkor Wat means city of temples, but to the builders, it was more than that. A city, yes. A shrine, yes. But also a mirror of heaven, of time, of belief. And it is only the beginning. Because beyond this temple, the jungle hides more. Dozens more. Hundreds. An entire civilization, swallowed by vines and centuries. And in the next moment, you take a step deeper into it. You follow a corridor flanked by quiet stone pillars, their surfaces worn, but not erased. They carry the weight of forgotten processions, of pilgrims and priests, of kings and dancers who once walked this very path. Your fingers trace the ridges where decorative scrolls spiral into stylized lotus blooms. The air is warm but still, and the walls around you seem to hum with old memory. Then you emerge into a wide clearing. Sunlight dapples the mossy stones, and before you, an expanse stretches out like a giant footprint. Low, crumbled walls line invisible streets. Shattered archways open into nothing. And you realize this isn't just temple ground. It's a city. A lost city, one far larger than Angkor Wat itself. You are standing amid the remnants of Angkor Wat, once the bustling heart of the Khmer Empire. Unlike the solitary splendor of Angkor Wat, Angkor Wat was meant for life, for government, for commerce, for the pulse of an empire that once ruled vast stretches of Southeast Asia. But now the city lies under a patchwork of earth and leaves. Roots the size of a person's torso snake through the stones. Termite mounds rise beside what were once libraries or audience halls. Trees grow from rooftops, pulling walls apart and holding them up in the same breath. Here the forest is both eraser and protector. You move carefully along a half-buried road. If you didn't know better, you might miss the telltale straightness of it, the subtle dips where drainage channels once flowed. These roads, like the temples, were part of an intentional design. An entire urban landscape built with precision, with a deep understanding of terrain, water, and space. And only recently has that design been revealed again. In 2012, airborne LiDAR scans, laser mapping from aircraft, pierced the thick jungle canopy and uncovered something astonishing. Vast city grids, hidden temples, reservoirs, and canals, all organized into a planned urban system. What once seemed like scattered ruins were, in truth, part of an intricately ordered metropolis. Angkor was not just a religious site, it was a city, perhaps the largest in the pre-industrial world. You pause near a pool of still water, a beret perhaps, a man-made reservoir. The surface mirrors the sky, broken only by the ripple of a dragonfly. These reservoirs, some spanning kilometers, stored monsoon rains to feed crops during the dry season. Their placement wasn't random. They were aligned, channeled, interconnected. A living circulatory system for the city. And this is part of the mystery. Because for all its complexity, for all its might, Angkor eventually faded. The city emptied. The people left. And the jungle took over. A breeze stirs the tall grass. Somewhere nearby, a gecko clicks its rhythmic song. It's hard to imagine this silence was once filled with the clang of chisels, the smell of cooked rice, the laughter of children, the chants of monks. But not all is lost. On one fallen stone block, you see a carving of a woman, an apsara, a celestial dancer. She wears an elaborate crown, her hands frozen mid-gesture in a dance older than history. Her smile is faint but present, worn but enduring. The Khmer people who built this city believed deeply in cosmic order. Temples, homes, roads, they weren't built for convenience alone. They were aligned with spiritual principles, with harmony, with the rhythms of gods and stars. This wasn't just architecture, it was belief made visible. There's a theory that the entire layout of Angkor reflects a mandala, a sacred diagram of the universe in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. From the central tower of Angkor Wat, outward through concentric enclosures and moats, the city expands like a lotus unfolding, each petal a district, a shrine, a life. And in this sacred geometry, every resident had their place. You imagine a family, mother, father, children, gathered in a stilted wooden house beside a canal. Offerings at a small household shrine, morning light filtering through palm leaves, the smell of lemongrass and incense. They are gone now, but their world remains, like an echo held in stone and shadow. As you walk, your foot slips on a stone that once formed a threshold, a simple platform, perhaps the entrance to a school or a place of judgment or trade. You imagine a monk stepping through it with bare feet, robes rustling. The stone remembers what you cannot. The jungle does not destroy indiscriminately. It holds, it enfolds, and sometimes it hides. For centuries, travelers spoke of a great city swallowed by the forest, a place of towers and pools and gods carved into walls. Early explorers dismissed these tales as legend. Surely, they thought, such a civilization could not have existed here, in the tropics, where decay is constant. But the evidence was always here. waiting to be seen with new eyes. LiDAR revealed the full truth only recently, but the forest had never truly forgotten. Beneath the vines, beneath the mud and leaves, the city was always there. And now so are you. In this quiet, you begin to sense a strange contradiction. The immense energy it took to create this city, and the slow, peaceful way it has returned to the earth. Not with flames or war, but with vines curling around columns, with soil softening stone, with time laying its hand gently across memory. And the question lingers in the air, like morning mist rising from the stones. How could something so grand, so vast, so carefully made vanish? You press onward. There is more to see and more to feel. Because this mystery, like the city itself, has layers, and the stones are not finished speaking. You continue along a narrow causeway where tufts of grass push up between the ancient stones. Each step you take sounds muted, cushioned by centuries. Ahead, a weathered wall rises, flanked by sculpted columns and crowned by the thick canopy above. The light is changing now. Sunbeams break through in golden slivers, catching motes of dust suspended in the air. You pause beneath a low archway and feel the cool shadow draw you in like a breath. Inside, the corridor narrows. The temperature drops. You smell damp stone, the faint mineral tang of rain that fell days ago but lingers still. Here, the carvings on the wall are especially crisp, untouched by centuries of wind and water. Scenes unfold like silent stories. Armies march beneath banners, gods descend from the heavens, and apsaras spin an eternal dance. You run your hand along one of the bas-reliefs. The stone is smooth, cool, but it wasn't always so bare. Once it was painted, reds, golds, blacks, and blues. Time has stolen the color, but not the form. The precision of the carving is hypnotic. Figures are layered with depth, their bodies posed with balance and grace. It isn't just decorative, it's symbolic, instructive, spiritual. The most striking thing, though, is the sheer scale. Angkor Wat contains over 2,000 square meters of carved bas-reliefs. Every surface seems touched by human hands. The labor alone is difficult to imagine. Not just carving the scenes, but first quarrying the sandstone. Each block, some weighing over a ton, transported from a mountain more than 50 kilometers away, likely floated down the Siem Reap River on rafts. Then placed, fitted, and etched, without mortar, with barely any visible gaps. It's not just artistry, it's engineering at a level that defies expectation. And it still endures. Monsoon after monsoon, century after century, and yet these carvings remain, more intact than many built only a few hundred years ago in gentler climates. The stone itself seems to resist time. One theory is that the type of sandstone used, high in quartz and tightly grained, was particularly durable. But another part of it is how the blocks were placed, interlocked, layered, positioned for maximum drainage and minimum erosion. And yet, not all damage comes from nature. You spot a line of carvings where the faces have been deliberately chipped away. Not worn by wind, but broken, struck off cleanly, purposefully. You wonder why. Was it a change in regime, in religion? A wave of iconoclasm that turned divine figures into targets? This introduces a mystery within the mystery. Many of the most finely carved figures are of Hindu deities, especially Vishnu, to whom Angkor Wat was originally dedicated. But later, as Buddhist rulers came to power, some of these carvings were altered or replaced. It wasn't always violent. Often the changes were subtle. New symbols added, meanings reshaped. The temple evolved just as its civilization did. But some transitions left scars. You step back and look at one of the larger narrative panels, the churning of the ocean of milk, a Hindu creation myth rendered in exquisite detail. Gods and demons pull at a giant serpent wrapped around a mountain, churning the cosmic ocean to release the nectar of immortality. The scene is dynamic, alive with tension and movement. Shoulders strain, hair flows, faces lock in effort and rivalry. This story wasn't placed here by accident. It reflects not just a myth, but the cosmology of the people who built Angkor Wat. To them, the temple wasn't just a place of worship. It was the universe itself, constructed in stone. The 5 towers at the center represent Mount Meru, the sacred mountain at the center of all things in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. The concentric galleries around it symbolize the continents, and the surrounding moat mirrors the cosmic ocean. When you walk through the temple, you aren't just moving through space. You are ascending, drawing closer to the divine. That's one theory. Another suggests the temple was also a giant calendar, its dimensions and alignments marking solar and lunar events. The central axis is oriented precisely to the west, an unusual feature since most temples face east. At the spring equinox, the sun rises directly over the central tower when viewed from the western entrance. Some researchers believe the layout encodes astronomical knowledge, tying together time, space, and myth. A gust of wind rustles through the open corridor. A few dry leaves tumble across the floor. You can almost hear the whisper of scholars arguing softly in some shaded corner. Was this a temple? A tomb? An observatory? Was it meant to endure as memory or to actively shape the heavens? And then there's a softer theory, one whispered by monks and poets, that Angkor Wat was built not just for gods or kings, but for the soul, that each wall, each carving, each courtyard is a step in meditation, a movement through light and shadow meant to calm, to still, to awaken. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. The quiet is deep, not empty, but dense, full of insects humming, birds calling, and some distant crack of a shifting branch. When you open your eyes, the carvings remain as they were, patient, present. You wonder how long they will last, how many more centuries they will watch people come and go, tourists, monks, archaeologists, wanderers. How many more questions they will quietly endure without answering. Because these stones don't speak in facts, they speak in form, in presence, in endurance. And as you move deeper into the temple, with the sun rising higher, you begin to feel that this mystery isn't only about who built Angkor Wat or how. It's about why they believed it was worth building at all. You pause beneath the central tower, where shadow and sun shift across the layered terraces like drifting memories. The highest tier of Angkor Wat rises above you now, 5 towers crowning the summit like stone flames. Birds circle quietly overhead. Below, the galleries stretch outward in concentric form, precise and symmetrical, but never rigid. The layout breathes. It flows. You are standing in the beating heart of the temple, and maybe, just maybe, in the center of an ancient idea made manifest. From this vantage, the vastness of Angkor becomes even more striking. The scope of labor, the coordination, the will to create something of this magnitude, it all begins to crystallize into a single question. Who could have imagined this? And the answer comes softly, like the first footfall in a great hall. Suryavarman Turn, Jarikamakinan, Bisern Cernan Mons. His name emerges like a ripple across still water. A king, yes, but also more than that, a ruler who declared himself both human and divine, warrior and visionary, the man behind Angkor Wat. Little survives in the way of first-hand records, but fragments endure, inscriptions, bas-reliefs, references in Chinese annals. Suryavarman II reigned in the early 12th century, and it was under his command that Angkor Wat was begun, though he would not live to see it completed. You walk slowly toward a corner relief where his likeness is preserved. Suryavarman stands tall, flanked by attendants. He holds a weapon and wears a headdress shaped like a pointed crown. His posture radiates control. Behind him, soldiers march in formation. Above, parasols flutter, symbols of royalty and divinity. This is not a king in repose. This is a king in command. A soft breeze stirs your clothing. Somewhere behind you, a cicada begins its rising song. You remain still, listening, your eyes on the stone. What drove him? There are theories, of course. Some say Suryavarman II was obsessed with immortality, that he built Angkor Wat not as a temple for others, but as a mausoleum for himself, a stairway to the heavens etched in stone. The temple's orientation, unusually to the west, is sometimes interpreted as a symbol of death. For the west is where the sun sets, and where souls begin their journey into the afterlife. If true, then every block, every corridor, every carved scene becomes something else entirely, a ritualized path through death, a journey from earthly life toward transcendence. You touch the wall again, and your fingertips settle in the groove of a chisel line, shallow, deliberate. Hundreds of thousands of such marks surround you, each one left by a hand, by a person, by laborers, artists, monks, slaves, or volunteers. No one knows for sure. The workforce behind Angkor Wat remains another mystery. It would have taken decades, generations perhaps, and it wasn't only stone. Massive volumes of sand had to be excavated to create moats and leveled foundations. Causeways had to be laid. A road network had to support transport. It was a logistical operation as complex as any modern infrastructure project, all of it directed toward a singular purpose. And Suryavarman's ambitions weren't limited to temples. He also sought to unify a vast and diverse empire. From the Mekong Delta to the edge of the Chao Phraya Basin, his armies moved steadily, bringing distant regions under Khmer control. His rule is marked not just by art and architecture, but by expansion and consolidation. There's a theory, softly debated among scholars, that Angkor Wat was also a symbol of power in a time of rising uncertainty. A monument not just for the gods, but for the eyes of rivals. A message in stone. Here is a king who builds with the gods' hands. A bird calls from the rafters above. Its wings flutter briefly in a shaft of light before disappearing into shadow. You think of all the voices that once echoed in this space. Priests reciting hymns, artisans shouting measurements, children running across the galleries when no one was watching. Time folds in here. Past and present do not keep distance. You follow a narrow stairway upward. The steps are steep, as if demanding reverence with every climb. Each landing offers a tighter view of the inner sanctum. A tower rises above you now, and its shadow touches your shoulder. It's said that at the precise center of the temple once stood a statue of Vishnu, eight-armed, gold-leafed, magnificent. Whether it was placed there for worship or for ritual only is unclear. The statue is gone now, but the emptiness remains palpable, deliberate. And here's where the speculation sharpens again. Some believe that Suryavarman II intended Angkor Wat to be not just a home for Vishnu, but a physical manifestation of Vishnu himself. That the entire temple, with its mountain-shaped towers and cosmic motifs, is not just a place dedicated to the deity, but a form inhabited by the deity. A god-shaped structure, a body of stone. You pause at the top. From here, the view is limited. Stone balustrades hem you in. But the sense of height, of proximity to the sky, is unmistakable. Clouds drift lazily above, and for a moment, you feel the pull of something larger. This is where myth and architecture meet. Suryavarman II disappeared from the historical record around 1150. No one knows how he died. No grave has been found. No inscriptions speak of his final days. It's as if, like his temple, he simply became part of the world, a shadow among the stones. You begin your descent step by careful step, returning through the passageways he once envisioned. The corridors echo with the quiet of stone and sky, of labor and silence, of a dream so massive it had to be carved into the earth. And as you walk, one question remains. What kind of mind decides to carve a mountain for the gods, and then build it by hand? You descend from the upper tier of Angkor Wat, your steps slow and deliberate on the steep stone stairs. Each rise and tread has been worn smooth by centuries of feet, monks, pilgrims, kings, strangers. As you reach the lower gallery, the space opens again, and light dances through the colonnades in golden beams. The air here feels stiller, yet fuller somehow, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting. To your right, a long panel stretches across the length of the corridor. It's a tapestry in stone, sculpted with impossible patience. Rows of figures march, kneel, fight, dance. Here, myth and history merge with hardly a seam. You stop before a scene showing gods and warriors in combat. Divine beings fly across the sky on fantastic beasts, while below, human soldiers advance with spears and shields. In the center, a multi-armed deity radiates power. Every muscle is etched. Every eye is alert. The scale is vast, yet every detail feels intentional. This is where religion and statecraft intertwine. The carvings along these walls aren't just beautiful, they're instructional. They tell stories of cosmic balance, of righteous war, of devotion and destiny, and they reveal a deeper truth. For the builders of Angkor Wat, art was not an ornament, it was a language. You trace the outline of a figure mid-dance, an apsara, her fingers delicately curved. Her expression is calm, otherworldly. These celestial dancers appear everywhere, on pillars, lintels, and walls, always smiling, always graceful. It's estimated there are over 1,100 unique apsaras carved throughout Angkor Wat, each one subtly different from the next. And no one knows quite why. Some say they are guardians of the sacred space, drawn from Hindu and local animist traditions. Others believe they represent aspects of the feminine divine, or the souls of dancers who once performed here in the flesh. Still others see them as messages, encoded gestures meant to be read like a ritual script. One theory, whispered among a certain kind of scholar, suggests that the apsaras were carved in deliberate sequences, choreography in stone, a temple-sized memory of sacred dances now lost to time. You imagine a procession winding through these galleries, priests robed in white, bearing offerings, musicians plucking slow, resonant notes from wooden instruments, dancers trailing behind, stepping in time with the stone. And you, an observer from centuries later, catch only the frozen frame of it all. You step further along the corridor and encounter a new scene, a royal court perhaps, officials seated in rows, scribes writing. At the center, a figure sits elevated above the rest, possibly a king, or a judge, or a divine intermediary. This relief might depict a historical event, or a symbolic one. Fact and myth blur easily here. There's evidence that some scenes at Angkor Wat reflect actual battles, the most famous being the wars between the Khmer Empire and the neighboring Champa kingdom. One panel shows a naval battle, warriors in boats with long paddles, water etched into the stone in rhythmic lines, weapons raised mid-strike, and yet even here, divine beings loom overhead, as if guiding or judging the fray. Angkor Wat is not just a temple, it's a cosmic play, and the carvings are its script. The deeper question is why these carvings exist in such abundance. Why so many scenes so carefully made? One idea suggests the bas-reliefs were created to teach. In a largely illiterate society, images could communicate far more effectively than written words. Stories of dharma, of duty, of kingship and karma, engraved into the very skin of the temple. Another possibility is that these panels were acts of devotion. Every carving, every scene, an offering, not just to please the gods, but to anchor them, to call them down into the stone, to make the invisible divine visible and enduring. You run your fingers along a line of script, delicately incised beside a carving of a priest. It's Khmer script, flowing and rounded, bearing names, perhaps dates, maybe even prayers. Much of it remains untranslated. The meanings, like so many other things here, are half lost, preserved but obscured by the slow erosion of time. And yet the stone still speaks. Your footsteps echo lightly as you exit the corridor and step into a courtyard bathed in warm light. Pigeons coo from above. A few pieces of fallen masonry sit half swallowed by grass. Even here in open air, carvings wind their way around doorway frames, delicate as lace, firm as bone. You think again about the apsaras, their ever-smiling faces, their fluid postures. Why were they placed here? Throughout every corner, every level. One monk once said, "They are the wind through the temple. When the gods breathe, the apsaras dance." And so perhaps they are not decorations at all. Perhaps they are movement etched into stillness. A reminder that even stone can carry rhythm. You lean against a pillar, feeling its surface warm from the morning sun. In this stillness, it's easy to forget that Angkor Wat once teemed with activity. Offerings brought daily, prayers whispered, incense coiling in smoky strands into the sky. The carvings remain, the voices have faded, but the message endures. That the stories we carve into the world, even if worn, even if half forgotten, will wait patiently for someone to read them again. And as you move toward the next chamber, another theory stirs in your mind. What if these walls weren't just built to remember the past, but to summon it? You follow the slow curve of a stone balustrade, stepping out from the temple proper and into the wide space beyond its moat. The air is open now, filled with the low drone of insects and the flutter of palm leaves above. The sky spreads wide in every direction. In the distance, water glimmers, a flat, reflective surface stretching further than you expect. It's not a natural lake. It's something else entirely. You walk toward it, and as you draw closer, the scale becomes clear. This is the West Baray, one of the largest man-made reservoirs of the ancient world. Nearly 8 kilometers long, 2 kilometers wide, its edges straight and deliberate. Even now, hundreds of years after it was first built, it still holds water. You stand at the bank and watch as dragonflies skim the surface. In the shallows, reeds sway gently. The sun flickers in long, golden lines. There's a quiet here that feels sacred, not just peaceful, as though water was once treated with deep, intentional reverence. Because this system of reservoirs, canals, and moats is not decoration, it is function, the heart of Angkor's survival. The Khmer Empire's great cities were not built near permanent rivers like so many other civilizations. Instead, they built water. They harnessed the monsoon. They mapped the topography, and they constructed an enormous hydraulic network, a system of reservoirs, barrages, canals, dikes, and sluices that captured rainfall and regulated its flow across hundreds of square kilometers. Why? Not just for drinking or bathing, but for rice. Rice was the foundation of life in the empire, and it required control over water. Too much, and the fields flooded. Too little, and the crops failed. So the Khmer devised a way to even out the seasons, storing water from wet months and releasing it during drought. You turn from the beret and spot a canal entrance, now dry but still visibly engineered. The walls slope inward to guide water's flow. You picture how it might have looked, bustling with small boats, workers tending the banks, sluice gates creaking open to release slow rivulets into the paddies beyond. And then you realize this isn't just about agriculture. This is about urban planning. Angkor wasn't a haphazard sprawl. It was a city designed around water. From the temples to the neighborhoods, everything was arranged with hydrology in mind. Water for life, water for rituals, water to cool the earth and reflect the heavens. There's a theory, elegant in its logic, that Angkor's layout reflects both a practical system and a spiritual cosmology, that the barrages and moats symbolize the oceans surrounding Mount Meru. That flowing water didn't just irrigate crops, it fed the soul. But this precision came with a cost. Later LiDAR studies revealed that the water system was fragile, over-engineered. As the city expanded, more canals were added, more fields, more pressure on a system that had once balanced with nature. One possibility is that the very system that made Angkor thrive eventually led to its decline. Climate records suggest that in the 14th and 15th centuries, Angkor experienced a series of devastating droughts, punctuated by intense floods, a chaotic cycle. The reservoirs could not hold, the canals failed, fields dried out or washed away. Without reliable water, rice yields dropped and the city's lifeblood thinned. You kneel near the canal's edge, pressing your hand into the damp earth. The soil is still rich, dark with memory. It remembers the rhythm of wet and dry, of labor and harvest. You wonder how many people lived here at Angkor's height. Estimates range into the hundreds of thousands. Some even say 1 million. And all of them dependent on water that had to be moved, stored, shared. The Khmer weren't alone in this. Other ancient civilizations, like those in Mesopotamia, in the Indus Valley, also rose on the strength of hydraulic engineering. But Angkor's scale is unmatched, and its hidden fragility makes it feel all the more human. You rise again and follow the gentle slope of a berm, likely once a boundary between fields or districts. You can't see them now, but archaeologists have mapped rice field grids in the landscape all around Angkor, rows upon rows, laid out with geometric regularity. You picture the laborers, bent-backed and barefoot, planting, harvesting, bundling. Their hands shape this land, their rhythms aligned with the temple bells and the monsoon rains. Water was everything. You pass a carved stele, half swallowed by creeping vines. Its inscriptions are barely legible, but the shape is unmistakable. A stylized lotus, radiating outward. A symbol of life, yes, and of spiritual awakening. And perhaps in this setting, it is also a symbol of dependence, a reminder that even the greatest civilizations must obey the laws of nature. There's something poetic in this, isn't there? That a city so mighty, so filled with stone and ritual, could still be undone by too little or too much rain. A dragonfly lands on your sleeve, rests for a moment, and flits away. You return to the water's edge. The surface is calm again, mirroring clouds. You wonder how many reflections this beret has held, of kings, of storms, of stars. It is a mirror not just of sky, but of history. And in that reflection, another question rises. Did the people of Angkor know their system was failing? Did they sense the imbalance? Did they pray for rain or fear it? Did they try to fix the canals or walk away in silence? You'll never know, but as you listen to the soft lapping of water, you feel the truth of it, that even grand temples cannot stand alone. They are rooted in land, in labor, in the quiet flow beneath the surface. And here, in the dance between stone and water, Angkor still breathes. You step away from the reservoir, the glimmer of water slowly receding behind the trees. The path ahead narrows, bordered by tall grasses and crumbling boundary walls half swallowed by time. The jungle thickens once more, and with it a feeling, not of decay but of endurance. Roots snake along stone, vines hang low. The world grows quieter, more intimate. And then rising before you with calm authority is another temple, different from Angkor Wat, less symmetrical, more introspective. Its towers are crowned not with lotus petals but with faces, stone visages, serene and knowing, carved into every direction. You have arrived at Bayon. At the center of Angkor Thom, Bayon is often called the Temple of Faces, and it marks a profound shift, not just in architecture, but in faith, in philosophy, and in the very identity of a civilization. The faces, more than 200 of them, look out from towers all across the temple. They are not fierce. They do not command. They smile, faintly, gently. Their eyes are half-lidded, as if watching both within and without. And the mystery that surrounds them is not just who they depict, but why they were made at all. You move closer to one of the towers. The face above you is massive, quietly monumental. Some say these are the features of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. Others say it's Jayavarman VII himself, the king who built this temple, merged with divine form. And perhaps both are true. Jayavarman VII rose to power in the late 12th century during a time of chaos. The Khmer capital had been invaded by the Champa, and the empire was fractured. When Jayavarman reclaimed it, he did more than rebuild. He reimagined. Unlike his predecessors, who built in the Hindu tradition, Jayavarman embraced Mahayana Buddhism, a spiritual shift that would shape his reign and the city itself. You step through a darkened hallway, the stone cool around you. Carvings here are different, less cosmic battle, more earthly compassion. You see scenes of daily life, fishing, cooking, children at play. There are processions and healings, pilgrims walking with purpose. One panel shows a woman giving birth, another a patient being treated. These are not myths, these are lives. There's a theory that Bayon wasn't just a temple. It was a manifesto, a declaration of Jayavarman's vision, a kingdom not just of strength, but of mercy, a civilization whose highest goal was not conquest, but healing. You pass a central shrine, once home to a seated Buddha, now empty but still resonant. This too marks a shift. Where once gods of battle and creation held sway, now sat the image of the Enlightened One, whose teachings called for detachment, for balance, for compassion in all things. Jayavarman didn't stop with Bayon. He built hospitals, over 100 across the empire. He built rest houses along roads for weary travelers. He restored irrigation, opened granaries, and commissioned bridges and schools. In the stone inscriptions left behind, he refers to himself not as a conqueror, but as a Chakravartin, a universal monarch who turns the wheel of Dharma for the benefit of all. One such inscription reads, "He suffered from the maladies of his subjects more than from his own. The pain that affected men's bodies was for him a spiritual pain." You pause absorbing that. A king who aligned his rule not just with divine right, but with empathy. Outside the temple, you notice the layout of Angkor Thom itself. Its wide, ordered avenues, its gateways topped with those same serene faces. The city was reoriented, not just physically, but spiritually. Jayavarman reshaped Angkor into a living mandala, a map of the Buddhist cosmos with Bayon as its beating heart. And yet, even compassion cannot outpace time. After Jayavarman's death, his successors returned to Hinduism, then later adopted Theravada Buddhism. Bayon's images were altered. Some Buddhas were defaced or hidden. Shrines changed purpose. The face towers endured, but their meaning blurred, softened, forgotten. You stand before a cluster of these faces now. The sun has shifted and shadows play across the cheekbones and lips. From one angle, the expression looks amused. From another, it seems mournful. They are masks of stone, but also mirrors. And here, another mystery unfolds. Why so many faces? Why looking in all directions? Some believe they represent omniscience, the divine ability to see all suffering and respond to all need. Others believe it was a way for Jayavarman to maintain a watchful, comforting presence across his kingdom. Or perhaps it was something subtler, a reminder carved into the sky that presence matters more than power. You sit for a while near a collapsed gallery wall. A fig tree has taken root in its foundation, wrapping its limbs around stone like a lover unwilling to let go. Birds flit through the open spaces where roofs once sheltered prayers. The scent of warm earth and distant incense rides the breeze. In Jayavarman's vision, the city was a sanctuary, not a fortress. But all sanctuaries must face the world beyond their walls. Bayan was never finished. Modifications were constant. Some towers remain incomplete, as if even the masons knew that change was inevitable, that no empire, not even one built on mercy, lasts forever. And yet, these faces remain, watching, smiling, waiting. You rise once more, stepping carefully between columns that lean ever so slightly toward collapse, but hold firm. Each one a breath drawn in stone. In the center of it all, you turn in place and look in every direction. And the faces look back. You step away from Bayon, the temple of faces receding behind you, though its gaze seems to linger long after. The trail ahead narrows again, framed by crumbling gateposts and soft earth beneath your feet. The jungle presses close here, but not with menace, with memory. Branches creak overhead, leaves shift like whispers. Somewhere in the undergrowth, a cicada stirs, and a breeze carries the scent of earth and old stone. And then scattered along the path, you see them, chunks of sandstone half buried, slabs the size of dining tables, edges softened by time, resting far from where they were meant to be. You touch one, it is warm from the sun, heavier than it looks, and you begin to wonder not just where these stones came from, but how they ever got here. Because that's one of Angkor's most quietly baffling mysteries. How did the Khmer move millions of massive stones, without wheels, without iron, and without animals of burden? You take another few steps, and the mystery grows. The sandstone used for Angkor's temples was quarried from a site called Mount Kulan, located over 50 kilometers away from Angkor Wat. Each stone, weighing several tons, had to be transported across rivers, through forests, and over uneven terrain. Some temples used thousands of blocks. Angkor Wat alone required an estimated 5 to 10 million individual stones, and yet not a single stone was out of place. You stand before a long, shallow groove in the earth. At first glance, it's just a dip, but upon closer inspection, it's worn, intentional. Perhaps an old transport path, a sled route, or the remnant of a forgotten canal. There's no definitive answer, but theories bloom like vines. One suggests the Khmer used an intricate canal network to float the stones during the wet season. They may have built rafts, lashed together with bamboo and palm fiber, guided down slow-moving rivers and through specially cut channels leading to the temple sites. You imagine the procession, dozens of men steering a bulky raft through still waters, chanting, balancing stone and spirit, then hauling it up muddy banks, sliding it over logs or along oiled sleds. No steel, no draft animals, only willpower, coordination, and knowledge passed down from hands to hands. Another theory leans on elephants, strong, intelligent, already revered by the Khmer. But there's little direct evidence of their use in construction. Carvings show elephants in battle, in pageantry, but rarely in labor. Still others propose a combination of sledges, rollers, and sand tracks, a low-tech, high-ingenuity solution. Some stones may have even been dragged during the monsoon season, when the ground was slick and pliable. But none of this explains the precision. You crouch beside a temple foundation, where two massive blocks meet perfectly. No mortar, no sealant, and barely a seam. You couldn't slide a fingernail between them. And that's not just at the visible joints. Some blocks interlock with hidden dovetail cuts and notches, ensuring structural integrity over centuries of storms and seismic shifts. How did they lift them, position them, align them? Modern engineers still debate it. Some believe the Khmer built earthen ramps and sand mounds, dragging stones upward in slow, deliberate ascents. Others think wooden scaffolds and pulleys might have been employed, though again, no physical remnants remain. Perhaps the most humbling answer is also the simplest. They had time. Generations of craftsmen working under divine motivation, passing skills without blueprints or manuals. You picture a grandfather showing his grandson how to measure a block by fingertip, how to listen to the stone as it settles into place. A silent art. There's one inscription found far from the temple that reads simply, "To build for the gods is to build forever." And maybe that was the key. The temples weren't rushed. They were not projects with deadlines or investors. They were acts of devotion, of faith, carved not in haste but in rhythm, with the season, with the sky, with the soul. You pass another cluster of stones, these broken and dislodged, yet still bearing ornate carvings, flowering vines dancing apsaras, shields and crowns. They were meant to sit upright, part of a wall, a roof, a sacred frame. Now they lie scattered but not forgotten. You wonder what it must have sounded like back then. The clink of chisels, the thump of sleds dragging over wet earth, the shouted rhythms of laborers pulling as one. No machinery but music in motion, the percussion of creation. And there's a legend, softly whispered through generations, that the stones didn't move at all, that the temples were summoned whole by the gods, or by powerful nagas, serpent spirits that live beneath the land and obey only the most righteous kings. According to this tale, the stones rose from the earth like growing trees, shaped by sacred songs and secret names. Of course, it's only myth, but you feel the longing in it, the desire to explain the unexplainable. Because sometimes engineering feels like magic, and magic, after enough centuries, starts to resemble engineering we've simply forgotten how to see. The trees sway gently as you move forward again, passing through a small clearing where a fallen lintel lies half buried in the dirt. Its relief is still visible, a chariot with winged wheels pulled by no beast, floating above clouds. The gods above knew no burden, but those below, they bore the weight. And in doing so, left us with something that still stands. You take one last look back at the scattered stones and wonder, was it strength or faith that moved them? Maybe it was both. You emerge from the stone-strewn clearing and step onto a wide path once paved, now softened by moss and time. The jungle opens slightly, not with grandeur, but with grace. Ahead, a series of smaller shrines rise from the undergrowth, less imposing than Angkor Wat, less mysterious than Bayon, yet quietly elegant. Their carvings are simpler, their towers lower, but you feel a shift in the atmosphere. The gods have changed. You walk toward a doorway flanked by guardian statues, their hands in prayer. Inside, the air grows cooler, and a familiar scent, old incense, dry flowers, stone dust, brushes your senses. At the far end of the shrine is a statue, not Vishnu, not Shiva. This is Buddha, seated in meditation, eyes closed, a faint smile upon his lips. You are now deep within the later stages of Angkor's story, a time when the empire, once so anchored in Hindu cosmology, began to tilt, gently but irrevocably, toward Buddhism. Not abruptly, not violently, but as the monsoon shifts its weight from one wind to another. The transformation wasn't universal or linear. Angkor's temples often bear signs of religious adaptation, not replacement. A Vishnu carving gains a lotus in its hand. A Shiva linga is placed beside a Buddha image. New shrines emerge inside old ones. You see the layers everywhere, one faith nesting quietly within another. This fluidity wasn't chaos, it was Khmer pragmatism, spiritual and political. Jayavarman VII's reign, as you've seen, brought a flourishing of Mahayana Buddhism. But after his death, power shifted, and with it, the empire's spiritual identity began to realign again, toward Theravada Buddhism, a more austere, less deity-focused tradition that still shapes Cambodia today. You wander through a small shrine courtyard. Beneath a frangipani tree, faded offerings sit on a simple altar. Jasmine garlands, coins, a plastic bottle of water. A saffron cloth is draped loosely over a worn statue. These signs are not ancient, they are living. Even as the great structures of Angkor began to fall into ruin, Buddhist monks remained. Long after the kings vanished, the wars ended, and the jungle crept in, there were still prayers echoing in these halls. Chanting, silence, smoke rising from incense sticks placed gently at the feet of stone Buddhas. There's a theory that Buddhism's simplicity made it easier to maintain in a time of imperial decline. No need for a king priest to anchor the cosmos. No need for epic rituals or massive temples. Just a monk, a bowl, and the belief in mindfulness and release. And so, the empire's spiritual architecture began to scale inward, even as the physical structures slowly faded. You enter another chamber, this one darker, more enclosed. There's a mark on the wall barely visible, an outline where a statue once stood. You notice the faint grooves where feet had been bolted into the base. The statue itself is gone, moved, stolen, or perhaps relocated by later caretakers. This space feels empty but not forgotten. You light a small stick of incense from an offering tray and place it gently on the altar. The scent rises, sweet, smoky. The smoke curls upward, toward a small opening in the roof where a beam of sunlight slices through the dim. You sit for a moment, and in the stillness something clicks. This isn't just a story of one religion replacing another. It's a story of belief adapting to change, to kings, to climate, to collapse. Angkor was not abandoned all at once. It faded like breath on a mirror, slowly, subtly, until what remained was not nothing, but something smaller, quieter, enduring. You recall a fact. Angkor Wat itself was never fully abandoned. While other sites fell to ruin, Angkor Wat became and remains a Buddhist sanctuary. Its priests stayed, its rituals evolved, its meaning shifted, and that's part of what preserved it. When Western explorers first stumbled upon Angkor in the 19th century, they were surprised to find it not empty, but inhabited by monks, still cared for, still sacred. You rise and step back into the light. The shift in faith, in architecture, in emphasis. It's everywhere if you look closely. The once towering temples of gods were never destroyed by zealots or torn down in conquest. Instead, they were quietly transformed, reinterpreted for new ages and new truths. Old carvings softened under new hands. Sacred names changed their meaning, but not their presence. You walk past a doorway where the lintel shows a now headless deity, perhaps once Vishnu or Indra. Beneath it, someone has placed a small, serene Buddha, one faith tucked gently inside the frame of another. It feels less like contradiction, more like conversation across time. And yet, even this spiritual flexibility could not hold back the forces that would soon unravel Angkor's might. Political instability, shifting trade routes, environmental decline. Faith can sustain hearts, but it cannot dam floods or mend broken canals. Still, in the heart of that unraveling, Buddhism endured. The monks became the final caretakers of a kingdom dissolving into memory. Their chants echoed through empty corridors. Their footprints passed over old battle scenes and cosmic churning in faces of kings long dead. And in doing so, they kept something alive, not just the temple, but the idea of continuity. You return to the trail, the temple now behind you, the incense still faint in your lungs. The jungle whispers its low, leafy lullaby. A bird calls from the treetops. You've seen how belief can be carved into stone. Now you've seen how it can survive without it. And you begin to understand, the mystery of Angkor isn't just how it was built, or even why it declined. It's how it managed through everything to keep changing, without ever truly disappearing. The path narrows again, winding through scattered ruins and soft undergrowth, where the jungle begins to reclaim its hold more boldly. Roots twist around staircases, branches drape over balustrades, and every surface is laced with moss as if wrapped in green silk. You move more slowly now, not out of caution, but out of reverence. The further you walk, the less you encounter grand temples, and the more you begin to notice the absence of things. Fewer carvings, fewer monks, fewer signs of daily life. And then it begins to dawn on you, not all at once, but like mist rising from water, that you are walking through the long, slow exhale of a civilization. Not a single ruin, but a dying rhythm stretched across years, maybe even centuries. This wasn't a city that fell overnight. It faded. And perhaps nowhere is that more profoundly felt than in the presence of those who stayed. You enter a courtyard once swept clean by generations of hands. It's quiet now, but there's something about the way the stones are still aligned, how the altars remain upright, that tells you someone has kept watch, even if only occasionally. These are the Buddhist monks of Angkor, custodians not just of ritual, but of continuity. When kings fell and courts fled, they stayed. And even as palaces collapsed and libraries burned, they kept lighting incense, sweeping thresholds, offering chants that rose into roofs long since opened to the sky. You imagine one of them now, draped in saffron robes, stepping barefoot through dewy grass at dawn, his footsteps quiet, his gaze patient, carrying not a sword or a relic, but a small bowl for alms and a mind stilled by practice. There are records, faint, fragmented, of the monks who remained, of how they adapted to the changing world around them. Some sought support from nearby villages, others retreated deeper into the ruins, turning former shrines into hermitages, praying beside headless statues and worn inscriptions. They didn't rebuild the temples. They didn't try to preserve everything. They simply used what remained, turning the past into present practice. There's a theory among historians that this monastic presence is the only reason Angkor Wat survived, while so many other structures vanished completely. It was not conquest that preserved it, nor colonial intervention. It was care. Quiet, consistent care. You walk now through a corridor open to the sky. Sunlight pools on the stone floor, where grass pushes up through ancient cracks. The silence feels deeper here, not because it's empty, but because it's held. There is memory in these walls, a kind of breathless waiting. You run your hand along a smooth section of stone. Once, this surface may have been brightly painted, adorned with flowers, or touched by gold leaf. Now it is bare, but still there's a feeling of presence. Not ghostly, not spiritual, just continued. And that may be the most surprising truth of Angkor, that what lingered was not its grandeur, but its gentleness. The monks didn't shout to history, they whispered. And the stone, perhaps tired of empires, listened. There's one story that survives in oral tradition, of a young monk who refused to leave even as disease swept the villages. He lived alone in a ruined chamber, lit a single lantern each night, and meditated beneath a collapsed ceiling where stars peeked through. No one knows his name. No statue bears his likeness. But the story remains, passed down like a breath. You wonder how many others there were. How many footsteps have passed silently through this place long after maps stopped recording it? Because Angkor didn't truly vanish. It simply slipped from view. Western accounts often refer to its discovery in the 19th century by French explorers. But that phrase is misleading. Angkor was never lost. It was never buried. It was visited, tended, prayed in. Local Cambodians knew it well, the monks especially. To them, Angkor Wat was not a mystery, it was home. You pass through a narrow doorway into a chamber of dim light. Here, someone has recently swept the floor. You can tell by the subtle tracks in the dust. A few lotus petals are scattered on a cloth-draped altar. There's a small bowl of rice, a bundle of incense sticks burned down to ash. You are not alone. You don't see anyone, but the space is inhabited. Not with sound or motion, but with presence. The breath of the place is long and slow. You sit on a low step and watch light shift through the doorway. A bird lands, pecks at something, then lifts away. You remember what it felt like earlier, to walk through the vast ordered corridors of Angkor Wat, to see the carvings, the gods, the faces of kings. But here is something else, a quieter endurance. Not carved, not commanded, just lived. The monks did not preserve Angkor by freezing it in time. They preserved it by living inside its change, by accepting collapse and staying anyway. And perhaps that is what makes this place so hypnotic. Not its ruins, but its resilience. Not the temples that were built, but the people who never stopped believing, even when the stone itself began to fall. As you rise again and step outside, the forest hums. A few birds chirp overhead. The world continues. And behind you, the faint scent of incense still lingers. The jungle deepens as you follow a narrow trail, half visible beneath fallen leaves and low-hanging vines. Your steps are slower now, as though the earth itself is asking you to tread lightly. There is something different about this part of Angkor, not in its grandeur, but in its silence. It's not the absence of sound, but the thick, humming quiet of a place where forgetting has taken root. Roots twist over stone like fingers remembering. Thick trees rise directly from temple towers, as if the gods now wear the forest as their crown. You reach out to touch one. The bark is smooth, the trunk impossibly large. You tilt your head upward, and the canopy above is a mosaic of green and shadow. gently swaying in the breeze. This is Taprom, not a monument, but a living embrace between nature and ruin. Taprom is one of the few temples that has been left largely as it was found, overgrown, consumed, but still standing. Here the idea of preservation has taken on a poetic contradiction. The more the jungle reclaims it, the more it becomes itself. You step into the central gallery, where massive fig and silk cotton trees have rooted through walls, their limbs stretching through windows, their roots pushing through floors. One tree in particular has wrapped itself entirely around a doorway, so completely that it's impossible to say where the temple ends and the tree begins. It's here that Angkor begins to feel less like a city and more like a dream returning to earth. You listen closely. Wind whispers through hollow chambers. Somewhere above, a monkey skitters along a rooftop beam, its call sharp and quick before fading into the green. And yet, this is no accident. There's a theory that even in its collapse, Angkor was preserved by the forest itself, that vines acted as ropes holding crumbling walls together, that roots absorbed the rains that would have otherwise torn down the towers, that trees grew over stones not to break them, but to keep them warm. It's a romantic idea and perhaps also true. You pause beside a wall where an inscription is nearly erased, the script soft and rounded from centuries of wind and water. But beneath the erosion, you make out a faint figure, a goddess, arms outstretched. Her face is barely visible, but her stance is one of welcome. The jungle didn't destroy this temple. It protected it. Before modern archaeologists arrived, Ta Prohm had been in this delicate dance for hundreds of years. It was built in the late 12th century by Jayavarman VII, dedicated to his mother, and designed not as a single temple, but a monastic university, housing hundreds of monks, scholars, and students. Stone inscriptions from the time speak of miles of buildings, thousands of staff, precious items like gold and silk. It was a hub of learning and spiritual reflection. But now all that remains are empty halls where tree roots drip down like melted wax. The university is silent, but the architecture is still breathing. You step around a collapsed corridor and find a doorway still intact. Wrapped on all sides by the bark of a strangler fig, a shaft of light cuts through the canopy and illuminates a single carving on the lintel, an image of Prajnaparamita, the goddess of wisdom. She is calm, timeless, and in this light you wonder if the trees themselves were always meant to come. There's a local legend that the jungle was not just nature reclaiming the city, but the gods returning to dwell among the people, hidden in leaves and bark. Some villagers believed the trees held spirits, and that to cut them was to invite disaster. And so they were left alone, and so they grew. You move deeper into the temple, where collapsed galleries give way to unexpected light. Ferns grow in the shadows and birds flash like gold between tree trunks. The forest is no longer a visitor. It is the other half of the temple. You remember how many explorers once viewed this place? With wonder, yes, but also with the language of loss. They called it a ruin, a ghost, a forgotten world. But to stand here, in this mingling of stone and root, is to understand that Angkor was never truly forgotten. It was simply transformed. Nature didn't erase it. It held it close, the way one might hold a loved one while they sleep. And even now the two live together, Khmer stone and Cambodian forest, each shaping the other in slow, quiet union. You sit for a while on a low platform, half swallowed by moss. Light flickers above like candle flame. The jungle hums all around, alive and unconcerned with time. Here, history feels less like a line and more like a circle. You close your eyes and breathe. The world continues, unchanged. Taprom doesn't ask you to understand it. It doesn't demand interpretation or theory. It only asks that you see, and perhaps accept, that not all endings are destruction. Some are simply return, a return to earth, to silence, to root and stone. You open your eyes again, and for a moment, you no longer feel like a visitor. You feel like someone who has come back. The path leaving Ta Prohm is narrower than the one you came in on. It weaves gently beneath a canopy of ancient trees, their trunks wide and furrowed, their roots tracing the contours of long-buried walls. The ground rises and falls in soft, grassy waves. Beneath each undulation, you sense the ghost of something once built, something vast. You pause. All around, scattered among the trees, lie the faint suggestions of forgotten structures. Rectangular mounds, aligned moats now dry, fragments of stone once carved and carried with care. What you're walking through now is not just jungle, it's cityscape, a city so immense, so intricately designed, that even now its full scope is hard to comprehend. Angkor was not confined to its temples. It was a sprawling capital, the heart of an empire that touched the borders of modern-day Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. But it's not only the scale that startles, it's how far its influence reached, even after its towers fell silent. You come across a raised path, once a royal road. Its laterite stones are uneven now, moss curling at the edges, but they form a straight line, disciplined, deliberate, cutting through the thickening green. This was no village track. It was part of an imperial highway connecting Angkor to satellite cities in distant provinces. Some of these roads stretched hundreds of kilometers. Along them were rest houses, water stations, and temples. There are records, both Khmer and foreign, of traders, pilgrims, and emissaries making long journeys, guided by these stone arteries. And the echoes of Angkor's reach didn't stop at its borders. You pass beneath a large, toppled gateway, half buried in vines. As you step through, you remember that this empire's footprint is found far beyond Cambodia, in language, in architecture, in the very rhythm of life across much of Southeast Asia. There's a temple in Thailand, nearly 400 kilometers away, that looks like a cousin of Angkor Wat. Its towers rise in the same lotus pattern, its walls tell similar stories, and it wasn't imitation, it was expansion, built during Angkor's zenith under the rule of Khmer kings. Even in places as far as southern Laos and the Mekong Delta, there are temples bearing inscriptions in Old Khmer, structures with the same stone techniques, the same alignment with the stars. These were not isolated projects. They were signs of a shared identity, shaped by a cultural gravity that pulled entire regions into its orbit. You stop by a small shrine, mostly collapsed. A single lintel remains, still balancing atop two worn pillars. Its carving has faded, but you recognize the lines of an apsara. Even here, outside the central temples, she dances. Always. Local legends in Thailand and Vietnam still tell of the great kings from the Stone City. In certain folk dances, movements echo those carved on Angkor's walls. In traditional Khmer architecture today, the layout of villages, the curve of roofs, the spacing of shrines, all carry faint traces of Angkor's aesthetic. There's a theory among cultural historians that Angkor's greatest export wasn't power, but pattern. That long after the empire ceased to rule, its way of seeing the world continued to ripple outward, through stories, through rituals, through the unspoken language of art and space. Even in modern Cambodia, Angkor is not a relic, it is identity. The silhouette of Angkor Wat adorns the national flag, the only country in the world to feature a ruin on its banner. Students learn about it in school. Monks walk barefoot through its halls. Couples take wedding photos beneath its towers. It is past, yes, but also present. Living memory. You find yourself imagining the opposite. What would the world look like if Angkor had remained hidden? If the jungle had kept its secret a little longer? But then you recall, it was never truly hidden. Not to those who lived near it. Not to the monks who prayed within it. Not to the villagers who guided curious travelers through its vines. It was only hidden to outsiders. One of the first Europeans to describe Angkor in detail was the Portuguese monk Antonio de Madalena, who visited in the 16th century. He was overwhelmed, not by ghosts or silence, but by the sheer elegance of it. He wrote, "It is of such extraordinary construction that it is not possible to describe it with a pen, particularly since it is like no other building in the world." That sentiment has been echoed countless times since. You step into a clearing, and for a moment, you see the full arc of Angkor's reach. Not just in territory, but in imagination. Its architecture influenced later Buddhist temple design. Its bas-reliefs informed artistic styles across the region. Its city planning prefigured modern ideas of symmetry and flow. Even today, designers study Angkor's layout for inspiration. Engineers examine its water systems. Historians still debate the meanings hidden in its stone. This civilization may have been rooted in one patch of land, but its branches have grown wide. You sit on a flat stone and let that thought settle. Birds call in the distance. A soft breeze stirs the trees. Somewhere, another visitor walks through Angkor, as you are now, and feels the same strange mix of wonder and humility. Because it's not just about what they built, It's about how far it all traveled, without ships, without printing presses, without digital maps. Ideas carried by stone, influence carried by silence, legacy carried in every face still smiling through centuries of moss. And you realize, even after the empire was gone, Angkor kept moving. You leave the clearing, your mind still caught in the reach of Angkor, how far its influence stretched, and how quietly it endured. But now a different question rises, quiet but insistent, like a ripple spreading across still water. Why did it end? You follow a path bordered by low walls and scattered carvings, many overturned, half swallowed by soil. These stones once belonged to something greater, halls, towers, maybe even homes. But now they lie as if gently laid to rest. Angkor's decline is a mystery that resists a single answer. Not because we lack clues, but because the clues point in many directions, like trails lost in the jungle. You pass beneath the arch of a broken gate, its lintel resting at a crooked angle. The carvings above are still discernible. An elephant, a lotus, a line of attendants in procession. They march forward, frozen in stone, but history has moved beyond them. One of the most widely accepted explanations for Angkor's fall is environmental collapse. And here, among dry canals and sunken fields, that story becomes more than theory. You reach the edge of what was once a beret, a massive reservoir. Now it's a depression in the ground, filled with grass and scattered pools of stagnant water. Dragonflies hover above the surface. The edges of the basin are cracked, uneven. Inscriptions from the later centuries grow fewer, shorter, and more desperate. Some speak of famine, others of water shortages. Climate studies using tree rings and sediment layers suggest a pattern. Decades of stable monsoons, followed by a sudden shift. First came years of intense drought, then severe flooding. Too little water, then too much. The system, the brilliant, complex hydraulic web that had fed Angkor for centuries, couldn't adapt. The dikes broke, the canals overflowed, rice fields failed, and with them the economic and political core of the empire began to unravel. You step onto a raised mound, perhaps once a roadway or levee. From here you can see the outlines of a grid etched into the landscape, faint but undeniable. These were once neighborhoods, alive with sound and scent and movement. Now only the shape remains. But climate wasn't the only force at work. There were external conflicts, wars with neighboring kingdoms, especially the Siamese to the west. Historical records describe battles, sieges, the movement of capitals. By the 15th century, the Siamese had become powerful enough to challenge Khmer dominance. Some believe that a decisive blow came in 1431 when Siamese forces attacked and occupied Angkor Thom. But there's little evidence of mass destruction or fire. No layer of ash. No bodies buried in haste. It wasn't a fall in flames. It was more like a withdrawal. The capital shifted south, closer to the Mekong River, perhaps for trade or proximity to water. The temples remained, but the seat of power had moved. Angkor was left behind. Not ruined, just quiet. You step into another empty courtyard. A frangipani tree grows in the center. Its blossoms are white and pink, impossibly bright against the gray stone. A small shrine sits at its base, where someone has left an offering. A candle, a folded paper flower, a coin dulled by weather. Someone still remembers. There's a soft irony here. While Western history often frames Angkor's decline as a dramatic collapse, the truth seems more nuanced. No massacre, no firestorm, just a city slowly emptied of its rulers, its workers, its breath. A slow forgetting. You recall how the temples changed with faith, how Hindu gods gave way to Buddhist Buddhas, how Apsaras danced through both. Maybe the civilization itself followed that same rhythm. A shift, a transformation, not an end. And yet even the most gradual departure leaves questions. What did it feel like to be the last stonemason carving a relief no one might ever see? The last monk sweeping a gallery before moving to a smaller shrine elsewhere? The last rice farmer watching the rains arrive too late or too much? We have no diaries from them, no letters, only hints in stone and soil. One theory suggests that the population decline was so slow, so extended, that it didn't even feel like a collapse at the time. More like a drift, a generation-by-generation migration toward more favorable land, more stable leadership, more water. You reach a gallery wall where the carvings have worn almost flat. Rain and wind have softened the details. Where once stood warriors and gods, now only faint outlines remain. And it strikes you. Even stone forgets eventually. But that doesn't mean the story ends. Far from it. Because even as Angkor faded from political power, its spiritual gravity never stopped pulling. Buddhism continued. The temples became pilgrimage sites. Angkor's legends were woven into folk tales and lullabies. And centuries later, when Cambodia sought to reclaim its identity, it was to Angkor Wat that the people looked, not as a ruin, but as a root. The city fell, the empire dissolved, but the memory held. You walk back through the trees, the soft crunch of leaves beneath your feet. The light has shifted, more golden now, slanting through the branches in long beams. The jungle, too, has changed, less dense, more open. And the air hums with the same question that lingers in every shadowed hallway and moss-covered tower. How does a city vanish without truly being lost? You walk along a quiet causeway, its stones uneven, its edges softened by time and rain. The jungle is retreating here, not vanishing, but loosening its hold. The trees stand a little farther back. The light reaches the ground more easily. A stillness settles over everything, as though the earth itself is preparing for a final breath. And then you see them, faces, dozens of them carved into towers, lintels, corners. Their expressions are familiar now. Calm, gentle, eyes half closed, lips gently curved into knowing smiles. They do not change, no matter how you approach them, but they watch you. These are the Bayan faces, yes, but they're not only there. You find them at other sites too, smaller temples tucked deep into the forest where visitors rarely go. And always they appear the same, peaceful, present. They are not gods in ecstasy or kings in rage. They are something else entirely, witnesses. You step closer to one tower where four faces look out in cardinal directions. North, south, east, west. Watching over the land, the sky, the people. Watching time flow around them like water. Who are they? Some believe they're Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, manifest in stone to remind visitors of mercy, of care, of stillness. Others believe they are stylized portraits of Jayavarman VII, the king who built Bayan. Not as a conqueror, but as a watcher, a protector, a ruler who wished to be remembered not by his weapons, but by his eyes. And still others see something deeper, something more symbolic, that the faces do not belong to any single person or deity, that they are the Khmer self expressed at its most aspirational, serene, balanced, eternal. You walk beneath one such face and pause in the shade it casts. There is a theory, poetic though unverifiable, that the architects of these temples believed stone could hold memory, not just images, but feelings, that a carved face placed in the right position would retain a piece of the spirit behind it, a kind of psychic echo, a resonance. You think of all the footsteps these stones have witnessed, all the prayers, all the wind and silence, all the years, and still the face watches. It doesn't judge, it doesn't weep, it only waits. You move through a hallway now, the walls close on either side. It curves slightly following the form of a mandala. Light filters through narrow slits. Dust floats in the beams. The silence grows deeper, more textured. Not empty, but full of presence. On the walls, carvings blur at the edges, like dreams dissolving at dawn. Many are damaged, faces chipped, bodies worn, but some remain whole. They watch too. There's a belief among some local elders that the faces are not watching us, but watching for something. The return of balance, or peace, or perhaps simply memory. That they are waiting for the world to remember what they once stood for. And what was that exactly? You pause beside a figure whose expression is especially human, not divine, not royal, just a person, eyes soft, mouth almost smiling. You wonder if this was modeled after someone who once lived, a craftsman's wife, a priest's friend, a monk remembered in stone. Because not all mysteries are grand, some are tender. You exit the hallway and come into an open courtyard. Here the jungle edges closer again, and the light shifts. The air feels thicker, tinged with moisture. The faces are harder to see now, hidden behind ivy and age. But they're still there, always there. There's one more theory, that the faces, placed across the city, across the empire were a kind of spiritual surveillance, that they were meant to remind people they were never alone, that the ruler, or the gods, or the law, or something higher was always watching. But if so, it was a gentle gaze, not the cold scrutiny of power, but the patient observation of care. You think of other civilizations, their statues stern, their gods vengeful, their kings towering above the people. But here the faces are level with you, eye to eye. Their gaze is not downward, but outward. And inward, too. You remember how the monks stayed? How the people slowly left, but never truly abandoned this place? How even as politics shifted and temples cracked and roots coiled into roofs, the faces remained. Watching, smiling. Their patience is not passive, it is powerful. Because they are not just watching for what was, they are holding space for what might be again. You sit in the courtyard beneath one final tower. 4 faces look out across the compass, their expressions unchanging. Above them, the sky is open and blue. Around them, the trees rustle softly. And here in this moment, you feel the quiet certainty of their presence. They do not need answers. They do not need memory. They only need to be seen. So you look, and in looking, you join the long line of those who have passed through Angkor, not only to marvel, but to witness. You rise again, and as you walk toward the final approach, the faces remain behind you, not vanishing, not fading, just watching. The path bends one last time, opening slowly into a broad expanse. You've returned to Angkor Wat, not the temple's towering silhouette from afar, but its wide stone steps, its familiar corridors, its warm golden stone kissed by late light. The sun is lower now, and shadows stretch longer. The air feels different, not heavy but soft, like a curtain drawing to a close. You stand once more at the western entrance where so many began their journey toward the temple's inner sanctum. But now your steps are no longer filled with questions. They are steadier, quieter. Not because you found all the answers, but because you've learned to live in the presence of not knowing. You look up at the 5 towers again. They rise not as monuments of triumph, but as reminders of time, of patience, of something greater than ambition. This temple, like the civilization that built it, was never a monument to conquest. It was a prayer in stone, a landscape shaped not by war, but by belief, and by hands, thousands of hands lifting, carving, placing. Each block here is more than material. It is memory, compressed into weight and space. You step once more onto the central walkway. The air shifts around you. The smell of ancient stone mixes with the faint sweetness of flowering shrubs. The sandstone beneath your feet holds warmth from the sun, but also something deeper, like it has learned to store not just heat, but history. You stop by one of the lion statues that guards the path. Its eyes have worn away, but its body still stands proud. You reach out and touch it, warm, rough, resilient. The lion doesn't need to roar. Its silence speaks enough. There's one final theory, simple, elegant. Not about gods or empires, but about meaning. That the builders of Angkor Wat believed the sacred could be found through repetition. That enlightenment was not a flash of light, but a long, steady walk through shadow and stone. The temple's corridors wind and return. Its levels rise in measured tiers. Its bas reliefs stretch endlessly with story after story. Everything is patterned, cyclical, intentional. As if to say, this is not a place to discover truth. This is a place to walk toward it. And perhaps that is the real legacy of Angkor. Not its stones, not its kings, not even its temples, but its invitation. To walk, to wonder, to endure, to change. You cross a gallery where monks once chanted at dawn. The echoes are long gone, but the shape of the sound remains. The columns still remember where the voices used to fall. Far ahead, a soft breeze stirs a banner hung from a shrine, a splash of orange against gray, a reminder that even now this place is alive. You pause before the central tower, not to enter, but to reflect. The civilization that built Angkor Wat did not vanish. It became river and root, village and chant, memory and myth. It became Cambodia, and it became something else too. Something less national, more human. A story about how we build and how we let go. The faces, the apsaras, the reservoirs, the carvings, they are not there to be solved. They are there to be experienced, slowly, repeatedly, like a prayer whispered again and again into the folds of the world. You take one last slow walk along the gallery. Light filters through the stone in golden bands. Dust hangs suspended. Your footsteps are soft, like those of all who came before. And in this final moment, you realize Angkor Wat was never meant to explain. It was meant to endure. Now, as the light fades and the jungle begins to murmur in the cooling air, you let the weight of everything you've seen settle gently into silence. No need to hold it too tightly. Some mysteries are not meant to be unraveled, but simply sat with, like a stone warmed by centuries of sun, like the face of a god carved so long ago no one remembers the name, only the smile. Angkor Wat, and the world that built it, leaves behind not confusion, but calm. Not a call to solve, but to pause, to look and to notice what stands still, after storms, after time, after even memory forgets. So take a breath. Let it out slowly. The stones are still here. The trees still watch. The carvings are still whispering, softly, patiently, like wind through a distant corridor. You don't need to remember every detail, only the feeling, the texture of the air, the hush of shadowed halls, the sense of something vast and human and divine, built with hands and hope. And if your mind wanders now, let it. That's part of the journey too. Because even as the temple grows quiet behind you, its mystery lingers. Not to stir fear, but to comfort. To remind you that some questions are beautiful because they don't answer. Sleep well, and thank you for listening.